Hi, my name is Damon Brown of DamonBrown.net. My main thing is helping you as a side hustler, a solopreneur, or otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. Today we're talking about Celeste Headley, the really popular NPR and TED veteran. I've seen her on stage before, and we're specifically going to talk about rest and why we feel guilty when we do rest. Now, I say do because resting is actually an active process. She has a new book out called Do Nothing, and it talks about the guilt that we have around rest, particularly here in the Western world. She was actually talking recently to Laura Vanderkam, who has a podcast called The Best of Both Worlds. If you know my work, then you know Laura Vanderkam's work. She's a time management expert. I was featured in her book, Off the Clock, and I've featured her in my ink column and a few of my books, including my new one, Built From Now. Anyway, she was talking to Celeste, and she had a killer quote. We're going to break it down right now. I want to make sure I get this quote right. Celeste says, if you think idleness is the same as laziness, it will give you feelings of guilt whenever you stop being active. The brain does not persist, it pulses. Man, as you can tell, there's a lot going on here. And we're going to go ahead and break it down as far as why, particularly 3 reasons why you should be very thoughtful when you feel guilt or shame. And we'll break that down even more about taking a rest. The first thing we need to understand is that genius takes time. That's number 1. Genius takes time. Genius takes time. I don't mean you become a genius like Albert Einstein and that stereotypical thing that we started to say about a century ago. I mean more the Seth Godin genius, or more the Gay Hendricks genius that he talks about in The Big Leap, which is a book I've recommended multiple times, where you have your zones of genius, that thing that you're good at. Communication is a really big thing for me. I've always been into communication. That's part of my zone of genius. Doesn't mean I'm a genius communicator. It just means that's a place where I thrive and I play and I enjoy it. Genius takes time. If you've been watching the program at all, you might remember I talked about Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, and what Bill Gates learned from Warren Buffett, and that was to clear the schedule. Bill Gates had this super busy schedule. As you know, he's the co-founder of Microsoft, billionaire, definitely type A, particularly for the first 40, 50 years of his life as he was growing this $1 trillion business. And Warren Buffett, who we considered a mentor, he was looking at Warren Buffett's calendar and realized that there were spaces that were blank. But also Warren Buffett is probably the best investor of any generation over the past 80 years that he's been alive. And so he learned from him and realized that if you want to change the world, you can't have a totally packed schedule. As I talked about in the previous video, Warren Buffett would have swaths, like afternoons, days where he wouldn't have anything scheduled. But genius takes time. And that's what Celeste is getting at, is that being idle isn't the same as being lazy. You reflecting to think there's nothing wrong with that. We shouldn't feel shame around that. So number 1, understanding that genius takes time. Number 2, you have to know where you're going to focus. You have to have a strategy for your focus. I was thinking recently about Adam Grant. He has a new book out called Think Again, but quite a few years ago, he was talking to Tim Ferriss, the podcaster, and previously the author of The 4-Hour Workweek. Great conversation with him. And he was talking about how he's so prolific. He's a Wharton professor, a busy one. He's an author. He just, again, came out with a new book. He's doing bestsellers with Sheryl Sandberg, the COO of Facebook. I met him at TED while he was doing a TED Talk. So he seems to do a major TED Talk like every other year, like a major one. And he's prolific on LinkedIn and doing his newsletter. He's just a busy guy. And he explained to Tim Ferriss that he's able to be so productive because he doesn't worry about time management. In fact, he says he's bad at time management. He said he worries about attention management. Not time management, but attention management. Where's my attention going? What matters to me? So my new book just came out. It's called Built From Now, How to Know Your Power, See Your Abundance, and Nourish the World. And if you're doing the math, when you're watching this or when you see this was recorded, you can figure out that I wrote it for that year that we were all in quarantine. And if you know my story, you also know I have 2 little kids that I'm the primary caretaker of. Long year. But I was able to do my attention management because I didn't have a whole lot of time. If you're doing the math correctly, I didn't have a whole lot of time because everybody was at home. My kids are 4 and 7. They need a lot of time. But my attention, I was able to do different things with that and make it work. That only happens within rest. And I was able to find pockets of rest, whether I was taking a late night bath, or when my wife was home, I would go and sneak a nap, or taking a longer shower in the morning when they allow me to take a shower longer than 5 minutes, things of that nature. But that's part of that attention management. Where are you going to put your attention? You only know where you're going to put your attention if you take the time to strategize. Otherwise, you're just doing stuff. When you get out of that rat race, when you get out of that cycle, then you're able to actually think about what you're doing day to day. When you think about when you're being idle, when you're pausing, don't look at it as laziness, but rather a time for you to strategize. And whether it's conscious or not, you are strategizing. Because once you get back into the game, you would have went to the bigger picture and then came back in. I think that's such an important thing. So number one, genius takes time. Even for the heavy hitters that we consider business icons or money icons or whatever you consider icons, most of the people that you might admire, they take their time. Genius takes time, whether you're trying to find your genius or you're trying to act on your genius and master it. Number two, you have to think about your attention management. You have to have a strategy of where you're going to focus. You only can have that strategy when you pause. Otherwise, you're just doing the day-to-day. But then number three, which is a big thing here in America, which I hinted at, is you're working through the shame that's related to not being busy. We tend to, at least here in America, Western culture, we tend to look at busyness as a badge of honor. I am so busy because I'm out hustling, I'm trying to change the world, I'm making an impact. That becomes the metric. So when you're not busy, as Celeste got into in her beautiful little quote there, when you're not busy, suddenly you feel guilty about it because you connect busyness to productivity. You're connecting motion and busyness to productivity. Busyness is not the same as productivity. But we're actually getting more into one of my favorite people, Brene Brown's territory, where she talks about guilt and shame. Guilt has to do with you on the inside feeling a way about what you should be doing. I feel guilty resting because I know that I have an article to finish. That's guilt. Shame has to do with worrying about what other people think about you. I feel ashamed about taking a nap or resting right now, even though I'm exhausted, because other people are observing what I'm doing and they'll judge me about it. Or I'm looking at what other people are doing and they're going to think that I'm incompetent because I'm not pushing myself as hard as they are. So it becomes a competition of the Joneses. And sometimes it becomes guilt because we're looking at other people and internalizing what we think we should be doing despite their judgment. As you kind of break through that, you're actually able to stop using busyness as a badge of honor, as I've talked about in some other conversations here. And so what you want to do is think about where you're going to have the biggest impact. And as I said to someone just the other day, how are you going to impact and change the world if you're exhausted? I've gone through this recently where even with me talking to y'all and the frequency that I talk to y'all, even with me thinking about book projects, I'm already thinking about my next couple of book projects, even though my book just came out 2 weeks ago. I'm already thinking about new book projects. I have a plan, I have an agenda, I have financial goals, I have a place where I want my family to be, I have a place where I want this conversation on YouTube or whatever platform you might be listening to be. I have so many ambitions, but I'm just in a body and I'm human and I was tired. And I was excited to share this with you because this is actually part of my learning process. Otherwise, I wouldn't be on video at all. I'd be somewhere resting. But it's so important to try to practice those ideas where we're able to rest and we're able to strategize, we're able to find our genius when we take these pauses and not to look at them as idle time. Celeste has a wonderful, wonderful example where she thinks about being life almost like being a fisherman, where the fisherman is sitting there, or fisherwoman is sitting there, and they have their bait out, and they're waiting for the fish to bite. Is that idleness? No. They're still acting, they're still working. When we sleep, or we're taking a shower, or we're going for a jog, or we're playing with our kids, or the kids that are around us, that's why we have these big insights while we're doing that, because our brain is still working. And when you rest, you have the opportunity to do that. So number one, as you think about rest, and if you're feeling guilty about it, Number one, recognize that genius takes time. My biggest ideas literally happened when I was in the shower, or when I was playing with my kids, or back when I used to do much longer walks, when I would do long walks, and suddenly these insights would come. Remember, the brain continues to work even though we're not conscious of the problems that we're solving. And in fact, if you're familiar with any of my books, like The Bite-Sized Entrepreneur or the new one, Built From Now, you understand that there are plenty of studies that say the brain continues to work even when we think it's not working. So number one, genius takes time. So you want to give that time for that. Number two, you really want to strategize and think about your focus. As Adam Grant talks about, when you worry about time management, that's fine, but you really need to be worried about attention management. Where's your attention going? Where's your focus going? You're only going to know that if you're in that space of pausing. You can't strategize and move at the same time. It's not possible. That's not the way that we work. It's not the way our brains work, and it's not the way that humans work, period. Number three, you want to help unload that shame that's related to being busy. Busyness is not a badge of honor. The pace that you're going to go at, whether it's your energy level, or as I talk about in Built From Now, your focus, your agility, your time, and energy, I call them the fates, F-A-T-E, your resources are going to be different than someone else. My resources as an approaching middle-aged man with two little kids that are super healthy and literally ran me all around the house all day, my different resources, my focus, my agility, my time and energy is going to be different than yours, unless you happen to have and be at the exact same place I am. Otherwise, the comparison doesn't make any sense. So stop feeling shame or guilt about you needing to take a rest or going at a different pace, because that's based on your body, where you are, based on the resources that you have. I think it's a really important discussion, particularly as we work ourselves really, really hard. In fact, as we shelter in place, which a lot of us are doing here in America and other places around the world, a study just came out that said that we're actually working longer hours, up to an extra hour every workday while we're sheltering in place, while we're remote working. So this discussion about feeling guilt about resting, not only is it pertinent to me as I'm coming off this really big book launch, but it's also important and pertinent to all of us right now as we try to balance our lives. If you want more insight into your own resources and strengths and how to maximize them, come over to builtfromnowquiz.com. That's builtfromnowquiz.com. It's based on my new book called Built From Now, How to Know Your Power, See Your Abundance, and Nourish the World. It's a free quiz. Literally hundreds of you have taken. I just did a tally. A lot of you have taken it, so thank you. And it's 3 or 4 questions, multiple choice. I'm told it takes you like 4 or 5 minutes. I designed the quiz, so I don't know how long it takes because I know all the answers, but it's a multiple choice quiz, and it'll tell you what your biggest resources are right now and how you can maximize them. And I'd love for you to come through and get some insight. And if you're enjoying this conversation and want more conversations like it, be sure to like it, whatever platform you're at. Be sure and share it with other people, which is so important because I'm trying to get the word out. Comment at whatever platform you're at. If you can't comment here, then feel free to tag me on social media. I'm Brown Damon on all the platforms. You can use the hashtag Built From Now, my new book, or the hashtag, which is the name of the show, Bring Your Worth, or more importantly, subscribe to wherever you're at, and you'll never miss an episode of this. And remember, always remember you can bring your worth and that you can always build from now. You take care and rest well.